consultant and looked at how can we improve governance in the lower Russian River. And so it's really intended to be kind of a high level convening, a bit of a getting to know you, so that we all actually have familiar faces so that when the you know what hits the fan during a disaster, we all have each other's phone numbers, kind of have point people, know what everyone's in charge of. But it also gives us an opportunity to talk about what are the biggest problems that your individual district is facing. And is there anything that I or any other district can actually do to help support and address that? So in the interest of phone numbers, I do want to point out that on that middle sort of page up there, I have put my cell. If you're one of the, 3 people in West County who does not have my cell phone number, that is it. So please go ahead and put it in your phone. But this is really about sort of what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, and how can we all work together to improve life in the lower Russian River. I'm going to start briefly with some county staff introductions. And actually the first one is a giant thank you. Can we get a round of applause for Debbie Ramirez? So and you can actually just kind of go down the line and introduce the D5 team. Field representative. Sure. Good morning, Tracy Lyons, Chief of Staff.
Good afternoon, all. Shane Sewell, Director of Community Initiatives, Supervisor Allen's office.
Thank you. And then we've got Ruby. The door. Hello. And Ruby is actually our intern in the 5th district. I also want to say thank you to Jeff Duvall. Do you want to wave over there, our Director of Emergency Management? I don't know if Scott was able to join us or if we have someone from Permit Sonoma. I do know that we have Kent, Director of Engineering from Sonoma Water, who will be giving us a presentation, as well as Andrea, who I just saw right over there, Sonoma Water, amazing communications person. And then we've got Todd, who is our let's see, what is it? TMDL Ombudsman.
Sure.
Essentially, but what is your official title?
Yeah.
That was what started.
Quality analyst, a bunch of person. Yeah.
Wonderful, in the CEO's office.
Yeah.
And then we also have Hannah Whitman from the CEO's office and also 5th district resident. And then I also want to say thank you very much to our fire chief in Boulder, my fire chief where I live, Shepley Schrothberry, who will also be giving us a presentation later. And then Brian, who just has his fingers in so many different West County projects. If there's something interesting going on in West County involving architecture, it's usually him. So with that, we're gonna go around. I'll pass the microphone around. And this is not just your name and your affiliation. I would actually like you to take a couple of minutes, hopefully not like 12, hopefully like 2, really truly a couple, to just say, is there anything that is pressing? Like what are some of the top issues or maybe potentially wins and positive things that are happening in the district that you represent?
We first just have a map.
Oh, yes, sorry.
They say their name and what area they represent.
Perfect.
And I'll just mark that down. That'll count for roll call.
Yes, that is saving us a round amount of headaches. So if you're a math rep, that is how you're going. Do you want to do that first before we do the one else? Okay, great. All right, so we'll just pass it along to our math reps here.
Terry Wzdowski, I am the alternate for Cazadero Duncan Mills. Present.
Carrie Hernandez, of course, no representative.
Betsy Van Dyke, I'm a Greenville South, party candidate.
Patty Thayer, Monte Rio, and Villa Grant.
Vicki Clues, representative for Hacienda and the chair.
Yvonne Green, alternate for Greenville.
Nick Thayer, Rio Nito.
Yeah, then we should probably start there with the districts if you want to start. So a couple minutes, name, district, top concerns or opportunities.
Okay, Marc Tran with the Sweetwater Drinking Water District. I'll let President Robb-Wilder speak more on this, but I think cell service is sort of a big one for growth opportunities, and I think wins measure H. That feels like a big win that can definitely help District 5.
Paul Berry, Cazadero Services District. Currently our challenges right now is for our fire department. Measure H funding. We're stuck with Perkins Sonoma right now, trying to get past our permitting for our firehouse expansion.
I'm Carl Nicolari with Russian River Park and Rec. Our challenge, and I'm probably not alone in this, is just getting a lot done with a budget that is not going to be rising much anytime soon. But as far as opportunities, we've been looking into how we can use volunteers, and I was actually hoping to do a little networking here with some of the other Park and Rec folks to see how they're doing it. That may be an initiative we're going to be looking at in greater detail in the near future.
Tim, it's how on the board of directors of Sweetwater Springs Water District, we're just concerned with being able to have funding to maintain and upgrade our fresh water system in the lower region.
Good afternoon, my name is Herman Hernandez. I represent the Russian River Park and Recreation District. And with that, I'm coming to my 51st year of serving on this board. And honestly, I've only got two individuals run against me in the 51 years, and I begged and begged. So for me to see so many of the elected representatives out here is so positive. And thank you for having this meeting also, Linda, it's fantastic. My concern is infrastructure. And with the infrastructure comes dealing with all the different agencies. And thirdly, when I say different agencies, as we are today, trying to get a permit to do a repair on our Vacation Beach Dam. The issue there is that it is taking a lot of time. And the other thing is when you have staff, a minimum amount of staff, it really kind of just drags. So my concern is, it is really the infrastructure, the permitting, and then, you know, I even gone to the bottom line of funding that project from what is not in our budget. So anyway, Linda's looking at me and I know that I need to have it.
I'm Chris Tachouet with Goldrich Fire. I would say our strong suit right now is doing the consolidation and having the resources to be able to blend and cover the large part of the county that we have now. Some of the struggles, I think, what I'm hearing is it's been facilities and permits. No, it has been a little difficult sometimes, but they've been really good at working with us lately, and I appreciate that. But we didn't realize, I think, part of it when we took over some of the fire stations that we didn't have septic, and that was been a challenge. That's been a real challenge to figure that out. And so that would be probably our biggest challenge right now.
Good afternoon, I'm Megan Perkins, also with Russian River Rec and Park District. I'd say our top issue is funding. Part of that is we are still making repayments to redevelopment. So we see money come in and then disappear again. The increasing in all costs, labor, materials, everything. The Vacation Beach Dam failure, and with that, Herman already said, permits from agencies we've never heard of before that are now being required at state, local, and up to federal agencies that we're talking to, so more than we ever expected. And then we have all new staff this year, starting around Christmas. So we are a staff of 2, plus a bookkeeper part-time. And so we are, of course, looking at volunteers, and our other top issue is a very small, very litigious group of the public.
Hi, my name is David Warburg. I'm with the Gold Ridge. And my personal interests involve disaster planning.
It's chilly. Hi, I'm Sukey Robb-Wilder with the Sweetwater Springs Water District. Thank you so much, Linda and Debbie and the District 5 staff for getting this together. This is really a good idea. We we are the ones who give you local water from Rio Nito down to, but not including Duncan's Mills. And we have some concerns, we have some issues. And our top three concerns really is, as Marc said, partially our funding. It's not so much the funding, that's gone away, the redevelopment went away. It's finding out how to get the funding, how to write grants, how to, who to go to. So we need that kind of help. And it sounds like other special districts need that same help. Another infrastructure ask we have is definitely consistent cell towers and consistent cell broadband access. We have already begun and are committed to a project to automate the meters on all 3,700 of our hookups and do this in the next year and a half. We need consistent cell coverage in order to do that. It's going to be a win-win situation. It means that our staff won't have to put as much effort into going around manually to meet the meters. But it also means that as so many of our ratepayers are absentee, it means they're going to be able to monitor their water usage remotely. So that would be a big help. The third thing we have, and I think this is really pretty much the most important one, has to do with communication and coordination between our district and the county and different staff people. And it's not so much a formal communication. What we need, because we do infrastructure, the county does infrastructure, and what we'd like is more informal communication. We'd like to know who to go to for certain things. We'd like to be able to develop relationships with parts of the county. We're really looking for a kind of solution-oriented process with some leadership from the county so that we can work together. We'd like to eliminate the duplication of costs that it is for the county to come in, tear up a street, and then we have to come in and tear up the street to do something else, but it's the same street. So if we could get together with planning ahead of time, then we could organize schedules, particularly for folding smaller projects into larger projects. I think there would be a win-win situation for all of us. Thank you.
David Gatlin, the Monterey Parks and Rec. Welcome all to our community center. I think some of our big ones are, getting the beach open this summer, making sure people stay safe, maintaining and repairing some of our aging services that we've got.
Thanks. Jason Weaver, board member, Sonoma County Fire. Our district is moving forward actively toward building a new state-of-the-art station on the site of the current station in Graton. It's an enormous project, multi-year effort. It's been in the works for some time. In March, we executed a geological survey to ascertain how deep the bedrock is there, to effectively determine whether the cost would be prohibitive to build on that site. The geological survey came back quite favorably relative to the bedrock that was found at the health center, which I think is 75 or 80 feet. You were seeing numbers more like 15 to 30 feet. The district is actively in conversation with St. Elizabeth and the larger Catholic diocese, looking toward purchasing the parcels that surround our current station on Armstrong Woods to the north and on between 4th and 5th to the west. That parcel currently holds the St. Hubert's Hall, which is a vital part of St. Elizabeth's community outreach. A number of food pantries and charities use that facility on a regular basis. But the diocese and the church are eager to sell the property, and we are actively working with them, interfacing with the leaders of the church. Mike Nichols has been part of those months here today, but been part of those meetings and those conversations, and we are trying to figure out the best ways to construct a facility to replace St. Hubert's Hall that would serve both the district and the community in a way that St. Hubert's currently does, not just for the church, but for larger Birdville and Lower Rush River area. We're hopeful that the county PRMD is permits is. I'm sure I don't know if you have a hashtag how permits, cell phones, like the permits come up everywhere. That's clearly on our minds. PRMD got some no net fill concerns that we're gonna have to deal with, of course, the next year as we break ground. And anything we can do to expedite, to consolidate those handling of permit requests would be helpful. Let's see, I guess the last thing I'd say is that we're very grateful for our partnership with Gold Ridge. And the degree of cooperation that's taken place between our staff and our leaders. You know, I'm very fortunate, I actually reside right on the boundary between the two fire districts, so when something happens on the street, it's like a contest to see who gets there first. It's not uncommon to have both agencies show up, lickety split, so I think both agencies, you know, we're working together to you know, essentially continue to strengthen our partnership, shared services, standardizing equipment across the agencies. It's very encouraging, and we look forward to continuing to strengthen that partnership.
Thank you. My name is Gaylord Schaap. I'm on the Sweetwater Water Board. Not as long as Herman, but I've been there since Mike Bradley appointed me in the late 1990s. Couple of things. Number one, you know, we sell water. And so our major concern, of course, is the availability of that water, which comes to us down the Russian River. And, you know, the water agency seems to think that all that water belongs to them. Because they built Warm Springs Dam, they have the right to control that water and regulate its use. Now, it hasn't got to be an issue yet, but it's one of those existential threats that could come down and affect our water supply here. The second item is maintaining the public trust with the ratepayers. If you look at, I know I just paid my taxes, and I noticed that the lower portion of my tax bill with all the other add-ons is higher than my taxes itself. And when I take a look at the sewer fees, you know, all these things that, you know, we need to be careful that our ratepayers don't turn on us, get upset as we try to pass along our normal costs without gouging. So, you know, that's always a concern for us, is to operate efficiently and balance our budget and take our ratepayers into concern when we set our rates. Thank you.
Thank you. It's always an honor to be invited to such a esteemed group. Thank you. I guess I'm a short timer. I've only been on the board 28 years. Unfortunately, I had to get elected, you know, 4 or 6 times. But anyway, thank you all. I think just a quick little, the chief's here, and he's going to give you the synopsis in much more detail. Consolidation for Gold Ridge has really been great. I mean, the biggest achievement to show you how it pays off is the average response time prior to consolidation with most of West County was somewhere around 12 minutes. After our consolidation, it is now somewhere around 5 minutes. It's an incredible improvement considering 60% of our calls are medical. That's really, we're saving lives, there's no doubt about it. And so consolidation, in my view, is something that networking, whatever you want to call it, whether it's official or unofficial, I think it has tremendous opportunity for our community. And again, our chief will get in the details.
I'm gonna give it right back to you. Thank you all so much. And I just want to reflect back briefly what I heard from people, which is actually some very consistent themes. I heard Permit Sonoma, and I feel you on that one. I had the experience a few years ago going into Permit Sonoma for a shower drain pan inspection and coming out with a red tag porch. So I know how that goes. But that said, you know, unfortunately, Permit Sonoma Director Scott Orr was unable to be here, but I do want to share that he is an absolute breath of fresh air. And he is completely committed to creative problem solving in Western Sonoma County and really all throughout unincorporated Sonoma County. We've also been investigating wastewater solutions. We're gonna have a presentation on, you know, larger system, sort of from the water agency, but we also now, for instance, have composting toilets and incinerating toilet permits going through Permit Sonoma, which offers different opportunities that potentially the fire districts who are struggling with this issue, might be able to leverage. I do also want to mention that she didn't mention in her job description, but Tracy Lyons is basically our 5th district Permit Sonoma ombudswoman. And so she has a wonderful working relationship with Scott and with Brian Kiefer, who is the ombudsman. And sometimes, especially for weird projects, and I would put like a school or a fire department in that weird project category, just because they're not permitted that often. It really does take, sitting down with Brian Kiefer, the ombudsman, trying to find, how can we make sure this is moving forward, especially when there's a clear public good at stake. And so if you ever need help with the process, Tracy can absolutely point you in the right direction, but we want to make sure that Permit Sonoma is not a sticking point. I also heard cell service, and that's what we're actually about to hear an update from Che. Funding, costs, coordination, infrastructure, water availability, and then again, bringing up sort of rates and costs of living, which I think are many of the things that we are also hearing from our constituents. I also want to acknowledge the concerns that I can't remember, I think it was Megan who shared about redevelopment. We've actually been doing some digging around that with Monte, and we're going to kind of look at Russian River next. Che has been having some conversations with the CEO's office. But I think it's very frustrating the way that happened and the way that basically none of you all get to sort of be done with redevelopment until everyone is done, including parts of the county that, are currently receiving your dollars that don't, actually get your constituents aren't getting benefits. So I will continue to advocate for that, but it's going to be a grim budget year at the county, unfortunately. So with that, we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Che to talk a little bit about communications infrastructure and cell coverage. I also just wanted to give a sort of brief time check. We scheduled this for 3 hours. I don't think it's going to take 3 hours. I would love to get you all back out into the beautiful day sooner rather than later. If anyone feels the need for a break, just let me know. We're happy to take one, but I kind of feel like I think that we can get it done sort of sooner rather than later if we kind of keep moving. We're on a good trend right now. So I'm just going to oh, and there are snacks if anyone wants snacks, so feel free to help yourself. And then if you haven't been here before, which I'm guessing most of you all have, restrooms are back that way.
All right, hello, everybody. I'm gonna talk a little bit about a recent post-MAC meeting we had, community meeting, because we did not have a quorum, so we pivoted directly into a community meeting. Being in West County, you all know that we have to pivot a lot, we should be pretty flexible. Sukey, thanks for teaming me up on communications issues, I will pay you later. As we all know, there are a myriad of communication issues in West County. We have a very interesting and sometimes challenging geography. As our friends in Hacienda unfortunately just experienced, even landlines cannot be depended on right now because we just had a copper theft where they did not have service for 2 weeks. Providers of all seniors in that community, and they were unable to completely call 911. So there are some county level efforts to expand communications. One of the issues that I want to highlight for all of you is that we do not have any power over utilities. That is a state and a federal issue. So while we can work with companies, we can make things more attractive for companies. I do want to, and I will end with, please make sure that you advocate with your state and federal representatives to get more services out in our community. And of course, we do as well. The county is working with providers to identify some public land for our cell tower replacement. Hopefully we can have some more GMRS placements on some of the towers that we own. Mike Nichols, whose name was said earlier, and I think sits on every single board in this community, has worked successfully with Jeff in the back there and with public infrastructure, that the sheriff has finally said, yes, you can put some GMRS radio repeaters onto the towers that we own. But we are still looking at backup and redundancy systems. Some of the key themes that we talked about in this meeting, there's no single technology, cellular, broadband, radio, or satellite, which serves all these situations. One of the things that Mike is working on is building a map of the 5th district and where all of these pieces tie together. GMRS works here, cell phone works here, landline works here, but as we know, there's plenty of places where just landline works because we don't have any other services. And then a copper thief comes along and that doesn't happen either. We are looking at having more of a layered system in that map. And then looking at how we can expand some of the utilities, like We have, we conduit, which is going to be bringing in $17 million of funding to bring back, fiber into our communities. It's going to have potential for future equipment co-location, backhaul support, and public Wi-Fi zones. So they're working with Equip right now. They're gonna be taking over some of their programs as well. So if you looked at your Wi-Fi on your phone right now, you'll see that Equip is a free Wi-Fi in some of our communities. That is backed up by Starlink, so that you can, when the power is completely out and there's no comms, go downtown and still have the ability to reach out to loved ones, tell them you're okay, or reach out to community services as well. We're also tying in telecommunications policy to our county for the first time. The community infrastructure, including utilities and residents, are going to be included in the county's communications planning, and this provides access to and flexibility to towers and relay sites. I already mentioned that Mike Nichols is working with the sheriff on that one, so that we can now have GMRS radio that is on the sheriff's towers. That was a little bit of a battle, and I really want to give credit where credit is to Mike Nichols and to Johannes from Public Infrastructure. He put a great deal of work into making sure that the sheriff allowed us to do that, because they were a little nervous about it. GMRS long range radio. We have the strongest GMRS mesh network in the state. We have 5 years of proven reliability in fires and floods and power outages. Once again, largely thanks to Mike Nichols. I'm going to be dropping his name a lot while we're talking here.
Tony also.
And Tony, thank you.
Yes.
Is he here? No.
Yeah.
Okay. This illustrates the viability of non-cellular supplemental communications for utilities and community members, for utilities and for community members to be able to reach out directly in some of our weird, difficult West County terrain. Finally, a pretty exciting piece that came out of this meeting. We've all seen on our cell phones a little SMS thing that says, you know, we don't have service, but you're going to be able to reach out to 911. And if you've ever actually used that, unfortunately have tried to use that, often it doesn't work. Well, T-Mobile is now working with Starlink to have a text message system, so that if you have an iPhone 17 or above, or any BlackBerry, you will now, within the next year, be able to text directly with other individuals, and of course, more importantly, with emergency services. So if you have a clear view of the northern sky, you're going to be able to text if you have T-Mobile, and hopefully we'll start seeing that with other carriers as well. So what are the risks? What are the realities in West County? We have terrain barriers we've already discussed. Even now, towers struggle in our deep valleys, our low ravines. We have our big trees that make things interesting. We have emergency reliance on communications that is problematic. We have outages, storms, fires, power shutoffs. I mean, once again, even landlines can go off. And then we already mentioned permit Sonoma and some of the permitting issues, especially with towers, especially on our north coast, 55 miles of the north coast. The Coastal Commission does not make it easy to put in more CapEx. So for strong communication, we need to look at landline, cell, satellite, fiber backhaul, and low power radio systems. We need to look at this holistically. We need to work with the conduit, with some of our other partners to improve GMRS. And we need to, as I said, work with our state legislators and our federal folks, because these are the folks that have power over utilities, and hopefully can make them do some of the things that they don't able to do. We're exploring our county-owned sites and need to work more with county emergency management. Thank you, Jeff, who tracks all of our outages, and anticipates some of our infrastructure developments. So at the end of the day, we have a very strange, difficult, rough district when it comes to communication. And that means we have to come to our communication issues through a diversity of communication tools and strategies, because no size fits all. And we are very lucky to have some of the entities in this room and the volunteers in this room that help to improve those communications and make that work. So I will take questions on that meeting, but I will say that I am a rank amateur, and I was really hoping Mike would be here because he can answer some of those questions. But any questions on that meeting and some of the issues that you
I also was just texting Jeff because he happens to be here, and I thought it might also be helpful just to have a super quick, high-level overview of how our emergency alert and warning systems work in Sonoma County, because this is relevant to many of you, especially on the water district side, boil water notices. We also, Jeff's office was involved in managing the sewage spill response and kind of coordinating between Sonoma Water and their emergency response and state public health. And so it was quite helpful, I think, for you all to understand how some of those mechanics worked, so that you can also reach out to Jeff, right? If there's ever something that, you feel like needs to be run up the flagpole in terms of broader communication. Then we go to questions for both Che and Jeff. Sorry, putting you in the spot.
Thank you, Supervisor. So good afternoon, everyone. Jeff DeVault, Director for the County Sonoma Department of Emergency Management. Thanks for the opportunity today. Quick high-level overview of alert and warning in the county. Alert and warning is our biggest and number one tool that we have to alert our community of evacuation warnings, evacuation orders, and shelter in place events. And how we accomplish that is through what you know as SoCo Alert. And SoCo Alert is our brand name for that. And there's two sides to SoCo Alert. There's what you know is the opt-in, where you go to socoalert.org and manually go in and put your information. That's one data set that we get. And then there's a couple other data sets that we get also. I'm guessing everyone here has PG&E. All right, thank you for that. Anyone live in the incorporated cities, if you had city water, city gas, I guess that's PG&E, Hillsburg Electric, all the utilities, by law, every 2 months, we get a data dump from them. Addresses, phone numbers, and names. And then we take that and load that up in the SoCo Alert. So we have what you go in and give us, what we get from the utility. And then the third side of SoCo Alert we have is the wireless emergency alerts, those Amber style alerts that you get on your cell phones. And then we also have access to the National Weather Service radios. So we can ping off the radios and set off our message there. And then the old school traditional EAS, or the emergency alerting system, which is what goes across the radio. And then we interrupt your favorite TV show and push across our emergency message across your TV. So we've actually done studies over the last 5 years of the opt-in data compared to what we get from the public utilities. Does anyone want to guess which one is the better of the two? Exactly, the utility data. And the reason why is people go in one time and update their SoCo Alert account, and then they go to the line. Phone numbers change, addresses change, and move out of the area. I love it every year that when we do our tests, we always get phone calls going, hey, I moved to Nebraska and I just got an alert. Can you take me out of the system? I'm like, sure. We work with them to get them out. So the data that we get from the utility companies is actually the most valuable data that we got. And when we go to do those alerts, if you remember a few weeks back, about a month ago, we had the hazardous materials situation in Santa Rosa over on Santa Rosa Avenue. Last year, we had a couple other smaller shelter-in-place events. Between the wireless emergency alert and the utility data, we're able to basically hit 90% of the target area that we're looking at. So again, the opt-in data, the utility data, that's very specific. That's to your information, your cell phone, your email address, your house phone. Wireless emergency alert. What we basically do is we go to a map and we set up a target area with, we got a couple of ways we can do this. We can basically set up a polygon for all 300 plus emergency zones in the county are preset. And we say, launch this wireless emergency alert in this area or in this emergency evacuation zone. And then that emergency alert goes out, and basically when we send a wireless emergency alert, we set it for about 12 hours. So that alert will remain active in the system for 12 hours. And anytime you go in and out of that imaginary line, your phone's going to receive that alert. So very high level there of how the emergency alert systems here work in Sonoma County. Interesting fact, when we send those alerts to your phones on the wireless emergency alert, or the WIA, depending on what phone you have, we either have 90 characters to fit our message in, or 390 if you have newer cell phones. That's why our messaging is very specific when we send it out to you. Who is it? What is it? What's the action you need to take? and what is the coverage area of the emergency, and we always also psa.org for more information. That's our tiny URL, takes you straight to the emergency map. And by the time you go to that map, we'll have the map updated with whether it's an evacuation warning order or shelter in place, along with more information about the event. Thank you for bringing up the recent Russian River sewage spill incident. So the other mission that my department does is what we call operational area coordination. And that's working with all the political subdivisions under the county, so the special districts, all 9 cities, when something goes on or something happens. So in this case here, we were able to pull our county partners together, public health, environmental health, county communications, bring Sonoma Water in, bring our state partners as they needed to come in for that response of what's going on, what do we need to do, how do we help and coordinate, and what information do we need to push out to the community. So quickly working with public health, environmental health, public health officer going, here's what's happened, what's the information that we need to tell our community right now. And then working with our public information team and pushing out press releases, pushing out update information on social media, county's website. And then we also leverage SoCo Alert to do a targeted notification of just the opt-in and utility data along the Russian River area, basically avoid contact with the water due to the spill and where to go get more information. So as we start to have those big incidents going on, our department comes together and we have a duty officer that's on 24/7. They're basically keeping their finger on the pulse of everything that's going on in the county. As they start to hear things going on, they're making that region out, trying to basically paint a picture of what's going on, the impact. Our duty officer is the first response for county government. So if a fire district or a sheriff or another city or a special district partner needs or has the potential for county resources, they can always turn to our duty officer. We can always get them connected and start spinning that machine out to help them. I heard reference to the dam that gave way. We saw that call go out in the system, and we started hearing the radio traffic going back and forth. Our duty officer actually deployed out there. That Battalion 7 from Sonoma County Fire District, because we were starting to get calls, started working with Sonoma Water. We're looking at video camera footage, and we could see the roller, the water came up, the water came down on the cameras out there. So we knew something before we actually knew what it was. The next morning after they got the helicopters and everything up to start running the river. But that's just another example of just there's more off stuff that from emergency natural dealing with them together important. Any questions?
Yeah, and I can run the mic around. Questions either for Che or for Jeff. And so Che has really been pointing on our office for comms, including working directly with public infrastructure and Johannes around the GMRS issue, and then also trying to support the deployment of CEL more broadly, knowing that we don't have control, but we do have land, and we're trying to make that available and trying to sort of do everything we can to get those underserved areas. But I want to what the cell companies always want to do. They want to put multiple towers in places that people don't want them because they don't want to share, right? And then they refuse to put them in areas where you all know exactly where they start and end, right? Where your call drops on River Road, where your call drops going up to Caz, right? There's all those places. So, any questions? Yeah.
Che, I wonder how much you work with Senator Mike McGuire or some of our other state leaders. If you said they're more run as utilities, so yeah, if you could talk about that.
Yeah, so when it comes to our assembly member and our state senator, I work with them hand in glove. I meet with them every other Thursday to talk about some of our other state issues like Caltrans. And I will say Senator McGuire's team was amazingly responsive on the copper issue that I mentioned, because I wasn't getting anywhere with AT&T because they don't really care. I can advocate. And then Senator McGuire's team came down on them like a ton of bricks, and I was getting the responses that I needed. So work with them quite closely, but it is always wonderful when our special districts or constituents also reach out and say, hey, I'm a voter and this is a problem and let's fix this.
Yeah, one thing I just want to mention is there's tremendous power in the room. And so think about all of these different districts, like if we were to have, for instance, one letter, right, that was signed and had a letterhead of all of these different entities, and that were to go to our state senators and assembly members, you know, or the CPUC or whoever, like whatever sort of entity is in charge, that would really carry a lot of weight. So, you know, as we kind of continue these sorts of meetings, it might also be an opportunity to collaborate and try to leverage our collective voice to get stuff done in Sacramento. Other questions, either for Jeff or Shay?
Back to AT&T. I have a landline and I live in an area where if my power goes out, sometimes it's out for 5 days. And my landline went out, a tree came down in the line at the end of the road, and it took them 3 weeks to come out and fix that line. And I don't know if I'm the only person that has a landline on that line. But finally, when they did come out, they actually fixed the line to the point where for the last 5 years, I've had a crackle on that line. And for some reason, they actually fixed that, even though I've had them come out and repair. So what is, and there was no talking to them. So how do we deal with that?
So I would say reach out to me directly. I do have a governmental affairs person that is fairly responsive on those kind of questions. I can get information, getting boots on the ground. Sometimes it's a little bit more of a push and I have to use our state and federal partners for that. I will say, and you know, we've seen AT&T put together 2 bills now to try and walk away from their responsibility to give us landlines. And that's horrible. The sad part is AT&T is probably better than Frontier, which provides service across the river on the North Coast. I had a little old lady who called me and she hadn't had a landline for 2 months. And you know, up in Fort Ross Road. And that is unacceptable. But the fact that she finally came to us, we were able to fix that within a couple of days. But you know, they're just not responsive because they don't want to do this anymore, and they are a company that, well, they're not really beholden until we reach out to our partners that do have some power. I could rant about landlines and how important they are and how difficult those companies are for a very long time. But please, if you hear anybody in the community that's having landline issues, have them reach out to me directly. I'm tracking all this, and it is extremely important that we know about all of those issues and that I can cover it.
Couple of straightforward questions. What portion roughly of residents in county have cell phone? And then regarding the WIA alerts that are zone based, thinking about tourists, do those go up to international? You know, if you're carrying an international phone into the zone, does it get the ping? Does any phone get that ping?
The phone should get the cell device should get the wheeler because it's connected to the cell tower. So the cell tower sees it and should broadcast the message out to it. We also do a lot of work with our tourism community, Airbnbs, VRBOs, vacation rentals. We've got posters that they can have to put up into their rentals that have basically where to turn to for emergency information, where they can write what emergency zone number they're in, both in English and Spanish. And then there was a period, I don't think we have any more of them now, but we work in the weather radios to actually put into their vacation rentals. I'm sorry, what was the other?
How many residents in the county have a cell phone or, you know, are totally landline because
that's a great question. It depends where you're at. If you're on the 101 corridor where cell phones are very resilient, you've got the signal service. I would say majority of the homes are cellular based versus landlines. You'll see some homes that may have VoIP numbers, voice over internet. And then as you start moving away from the core 101, you'll start to see a mix. And thank you for Schaap for bringing that up because we also have the issue of carrier last resort, cell phone companies trying to do that. So a lot of advocacy on that. But mainly on the 101 corridor, it's mostly cell phones.
Thanks, phone company, not cell phone company.
Yes.
Here's a question over here. And oh, if you ask that question of my 13-year-old daughter, everyone has cell phones except for her. She's very representative.
Jay, I was gonna ask you about the fiber optic installation that seems to be going on out here. Is that involved with AT&T and the phone service, or is that something else?
Can you be more specific as to out here?
Well, okay, a couple of years ago, 5 years ago maybe, there was a crew installing fiber optics along 116 through Gurnwood Park. And now recently, there's been a company and AT&T trucks up Old Cazadero Road, up into the upper reaches of the canyon where Albert Creek runs.
So I'm not sure on AT&T, but I can find out for you. What I can say is that We Conduit is going to be running conduit from Jenner up to Fort Ross community. And they have a project to run through Forestville as well. And that's part of that $17 million grant where there will be, fiber, and it's going to be part of a locally controlled nonprofit that is responsive to our community members. So I'm very excited about this moving forward. It's a very unique project, and I think it'll mean a world of difference to our community. This is just the first step. They do plan to expand much more broadly in our community and provide service. And, we all know rural internet is difficult. I myself got a Comcast quote of $140,000 to run a line down my road, and that's not gonna happen. So this is a quality of life issue as far as education and employment, and We Conduit is really making huge gains to improve that. I wish I could answer your AT&T question, but I will find out, Tim.
Thanks.
This is a comment more than a question. In Villa Grande and the Terraces, we have a pretty dedicated group of people who have GMRS radios. We practice monthly, so we don't forget how to turn them on and use them. But we really could use some guidance as to how actually what more we should be doing to prepare for an emergency, and how you use those radios in an actual emergency rather than just in a monthly check-in scenario.
Jeff, I'll pass the buck to you on that one.
Yeah,
that's.
so that's a really great question. I know through North Bay Communication, I said cooperative and BCC. Tony would be the greatest answer on that one. Through their group, they can come out and do those seminars of how the overall arching connects, how GMRS connects to ham radio, and how the both connect to pushing information out to our public safety dispatch centers, relaying that information going back and forth. So
Can you
there,
repeat the name?
Tony Goodwin, there we go.
Thank you, I did.
And really quick, if I can bounce back and Jason real quick, part of that study that we did showing the utility data, part of that demonstration that we did, we picked a neighborhood in Santa Rosa, about 60 homes. And then we showed how many of those 60 homes were cell phones versus landlines. And of those 60 homes, only one was a traditional landline. The rest were all cellular.
Any other questions? Got it.
Yeah, somewhat related to Jason's question about tourists. Would there be any more information when you would have these alerts going out? Would there be any way to add more information about what the zones mean? For instance, when during the hydrogen cyanide incident, I was driving when I was getting all those alerts, and it was only listing the zones that were affected by the shelter in place. I sometimes know my own zone. I don't know any others, so I had no idea if I was driving into one of the affected zones, or who to call, or who to not call, in my family or otherwise about this. And obviously tourists wouldn't know anything about that.
Yes, it's a struggling to bring up an example of one of our alerts. So very good question. The hazmat situation over on Santa Rosa Avenue was a very unique one, and that one was escalating very rapidly. So for us to do our traditional messaging of what the zone breakdowns were, it was not possible. So what we do, that tiny URL, so go psa.org, we listed the zones out. And then if you were to click on the tiny URL, it takes you straight to the map, and the map was already lit up at that time of what those zones were that were under the shelter in place order. For a typical evacuation warning or evacuation order, they'll say who's requesting it: Sonoma County Sheriff, Sonoma County Fire District, Santa Rosa Fire. What is the incident? Wildfire, shelter in place, for what zone, 5 kilo 1, and then it will list basically the 4 dividing walls of what that zone is. And then it will say what the action is, and it's usually evacuate now, prepare to evacuate, or shelter in place. And then it says for more information, go to socopsa.org. Again, I'm limited to 90 characters or 390 characters. You'd be surprised at how quickly you run through characters. Because it's every space, it's everything. And the same holds true because anytime that we send out an alert in English, we turn around and we send one out in Spanish too. So there's the challenge, is 90 characters and 390 characters. So we're real limited what we can put on there. And one of the things that the hazmat incident taught us was we need to go back and redo our public awareness campaign of the alerts, what they need, and where to go get information. But the biggest message to the community is we're really limited on what we can push out there too, because I heard it from everyone of, I need more information, but I'm really limited to what I can send you on that initial.
Any other questions? I actually have one last question for you, Jeff, and that is that, do you think that WIA has gotten better over time? Because I remember that one time, like, I think it was pre-pandemic, and there was, you know, a geo-targeted message sent out to downtown Guerneville, and literally none of the firefighters were in the station in Guerneville got that message, and it was very spotty, even in terms of who got it or didn't get it on Mead Street, like in downtown, like, you know, real estate office got it, right next door they didn't. And so do you think that, I mean, it's beyond our control, you said the message, but you give it to the telecom companies, do you think that they're getting better about making sure that everyone in those polygons gets it?
I love that question, and thank you for that. It's important to know when we send those wireless emergency alert messages, when we send the National Weather Service alert messages, and when we send the EAS emergency alert system messages, we're basically using SOFA alert, and we're pinging a federal database, federal system owned by the FCC, and then the message goes out to the cell carriers and goes out to the towers that way. On the federal side, that system is very delicate. It is very fragile. There's only one system. There is no backup. There is no redundancy. If something happens to it, that's it. I don't have anything. Has it gotten better? Yes, it has, but it only gets better if the cell companies are doing the investments. Now I'm gonna poke the bear. More cell towers. That's how the system gets better. Because every time we do tests, every time we launch an alert, I carry 2 phones, half my staff carries 2 phones, and we have a bank of cell phones. So when we do tests, we have 2 cell phones from every single carrier. And we go out in the field and we sit there and we see which ones get it and which ones don't. And then we sit there and go, where's Verizon's tower? Why didn't I get it? But I got it on AT&T. But I didn't get it on T-Mobile. Where's the T-Mobile tower? So to that point is, as long as we're getting the towers up and we've got the coverage radius, yes. When you get along the 101 corridor, definitely. I mean, we've got the coverage, we've got the overlay. The last 10 years, yes, it has definitely gotten better and more targeted. When I first started doing this 15 years ago, you'd have maybe a 6 mile lead over from whatever it is that you were trying to target. And now it's coming down to maybe 2 mile outside of the original radius. It's getting better slowly.
Thank you so much. Round of applause for Jeff and Shay. Now we are moving on to my favorite subject, which I have no idea my job would involve this much, is wastewater. And so I feel like it comes up in almost every meeting. I'm going to hand it over to Kent to talk a little bit about our regionalization study. And this is especially pertinent to those of you who are struggling with wastewater issues. We also really want to lean in and have a conversation with LAFCO at some point around existing sewer boundaries and what makes sense into the future. That would be possible as part of the general plan update. And, you know, this also has a lot to do with the economic vitality of our communities, right? One of the reasons that some monorail businesses have struggled is because they can't pull permits, because if they do, it triggers a septic upgrade that they physically don't have the space for. So I'm gonna hand it over to Kent.
Thank you very much. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kent Gilfie with Sweetwater. I'm a deputy director. Been joined today by Andrea Rodriguez, our principal program specialist, who's our lead on the outreach for the study that I'm going to be talking about today. I wasn't anticipating holding a microphone and managing paper, so we'll see how we do with this. Thank you for the opportunity. This is an exciting meeting to be at. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and talk on the subject. I will be presenting information on a study that Sweetwater's leading that takes a very high level look at the concept of potential regionalized sewer service within West County communities. A study we refer to as our West County Water Quality and Recycled Water Supply Feasibility Study. That's there you go. Before going too far, there were handouts. We had the handout for the actual PowerPoint, as well as a frequently asked questions document back there. So if you're interested in more information, those documents can be helpful. At the end, I'll give you the website URL. There is a stakeholder process associated with the study they're going to be talking about. There's in those stakeholder committee meetings, they are public meetings. So if you're interested and want to participate, there's opportunity there. And Andrea is our lead on outreach for this study, so a good point of contact for project information as well. And while we don't have our technical project team or our consultant here to dive too deeply into the study today, but we'll be introducing the study for any who may be unaware of it. Maybe that's the majority of you. I'll summarize the study scope, the study area, a schedule for the study, look at project alternatives, report on the current status of completing the study later this year. And just for any who are looking for more information or would care to participate, and hopefully I save some time here for questions at the end as well. I know I have a flavor here of something. I'm actually not ready for the flavor yet. Hopefully it'll work. All right, so this study commenced, we're going to stay on the slide for a moment. The study commenced in 2024 through an agreement with the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board. So regionalization of sewer service may be a means that of helping better address wastewater management challenges that are faced by small public wastewater systems that struggle to operate and maintain their aging systems in both a reliable and a regulatory compliant manner that protects human health and the environment, while also trying to do so in an affordable manner, serving relatively small population and rate bases that results in already relatively high sewer rates. And then coupling that reality with considerations of water quality in the river amidst an environment of numerous clusters of unsewered communities with many older septic systems, as well as considerations of potential influence of climate change having an effect on both public and private systems into the future and only making those challenges a bit more difficult. So in that context, this study is going to consider what does a regionalized sewer concept, what it might look like, what are various project alternatives, what operational or financial benefits and costs might be expected with that by some of the existing small and resource constrained districts that currently provide wastewater treatment and collection services in the West County, specifically for that we'll be looking at Russian River County Sanitation District, Occidental County Sanitation District, both managed by Sonoma Water, as well as Graton Community Services District and Forestville Water District. Could there be increased recycled water supply benefits from regionalization? Could existing unsewered communities be connected to a regionalized system, a larger interconnected regional system? And what might that look like for homeowners if we can? And might it make sense to potentially collect wastewater from the West County and actually export it to existing larger treatment systems outside the study area that maybe already have treatment and recycled water facilities that could handle the West County flows, like perhaps the Santa Rosa Laguna Treatment Plant, perhaps Windsor. And are there alternatives that would provide added resiliency to future climate conditions? So that lengthy introduction. It worked. Good job. So I'll first describe the scope of work at several aspects of which I laid the groundwork for, and talk about the study area and the study schedule. This is just a picture here of in our Russian River treatment plant of our tertiary filter systems, and in the background there are one of our clarifiers. So as I mentioned, this is a high level study, so it's not an engineering level study or a detailed implementation plan, kind of first look at things. There are two key elements to this study. First was the feasibility study assessment and report, which is substantially an engineering and cost-based analysis of several potential project alternatives. We're going to look at them here shortly. And then the second element of that is the stakeholder program that is intended to help inform the study as it progresses and identify those alternatives that might be most likely to garner community support. A study outcome of that stakeholder program is also to develop a project advancement report. Will help us develop a roadmap of next steps. So wherein, in addition to the technical engineering assessment that's being worked on, consideration will also be given in the project advancement phase, given to issues like the funding and financing options. How would we pay for it? As well as governance, considering whether there are alternative governance structures that may make more sense to operate a regional system than the 4 existing small public systems, 2 of them managed by Sonoma Water, that currently manage those public wastewater systems in the study area. And of the alternative project concepts, which are all very expensive, which we're going to see that too, in order to fully build them out, are there certain elements of those, smaller subsections of those that may make more sense to implement than others? Is there some mixing, matching perhaps of some of the project concepts that may make sense? And what phases of work might be prioritized first, depending on the availability of funding or types of funding? So those are some of the considerations that we'll be looking at in the project advancement report phase of the study. So this is just a high level map of what is in the study area that was looked at. You can see that it does capture the service areas of the 4 existing public wastewater systems that I talked about. I know there's a pointer on here somewhere, but I won't try and mess that up. But
I can point at things.
okay, well, okay, starting on the left, we have the Russian River County Sanitation District, the blue area up there. And then to the right, the Forestville Water District, the yellow, and the Graton system in the orange, and Occidental to the lower left. It also, of course, the study area, as you can see, so those are the service areas that are highlighted there, but within the study area, significant more rural environs, a number of unsewered communities like Camp Beaker, Hollydale, Hacienda, and others. The Monterey Villa Grande area that's shown in purple there is also considered in the study. It's not shown within the green line, but it is considered in the study, kind of in special fashion, because there was a separate wastewater study for the Monterey Villa Grande area, and the evaluations and findings of that study were also integrated and relied upon for portions of this broader study. Okay, so I won't go through all this and don't expect you to read all of that, but this table does lay out kind of the major phases and timelines, working with both our technical advisory committee or our project team and the stakeholder committee, showing just how we're progressing from fall of 2024, wherein we were defining what the study area was, then spending most of 2025 developing the project alternatives for interconnecting these existing public systems, then subsequently assessing the ability to connect unsewered community clusters. Assessing recycled water and climate change resiliency aspects. So that by the winter of 2025, so this past winter, we were conducting review and providing the draft technical feasibility study to the regional board, North Coast Regional Board, for review. They have it in review right now. We're hoping by the end of this month, I believe, to see their comments back. So that the technical report can be completed by the beginning of June. So now being here in the spring of 2026, we're in the early stages of working on the project advancement report that I spoke of a bit earlier, with committee meeting number 7 with the stakeholder group coming up next week, this Wednesday, which is our first committee meeting dedicated solely to the project advancement report phase. So we'll look at the project alternatives next. This is just a picture of North Coast Golf Course, where in Russian Rivers, CSD's treatment plant provides recycled water for the golf course. So we considered 3 categories of regional solutions. The first being local facility scenarios, managing wastewater treatment locally amongst the existing treatment facilities, modified as they would be modified to some degree. And without exporting any wastewater outside of the study area. So there's 3 scenarios under the local facility scenarios. The second category being export scenarios, exporting all sewered wastewater to the larger existing treatment facilities outside of the study area. So there are 3 scenarios that were considered there. And then the third category being a combination of local and export scenarios. And there were 2 scenarios under that category. So under the local facilities category, the 3 scenarios included, there was alternative 1A, consisting of modifying and maintaining 2 West County regional treatment facilities, one at Russian River, the existing one at Russian River, and then another one, which is the combination of Graton and Forestville. Those plants already have some degree of interconnection. But that would be expanded upon, and it would be treated like a combined treatment facility between the 2. That's alternative 1A, maintaining 2 local regional facilities. Alternative 1B is a single regional treatment facility around Russian River, being at Russian River treatment plant. And then alternative 1C was a single regional treatment facility focused around this combined Graton Forestville concept. So hopefully that's self-defining for you as to how those communities in closest proximity to those treatment plants would be routed to the nearest facility. Oxnell and Camp for example, would be routed over to what will be a future Graton Forestville system. And there's another project in there we can talk about. So note at this stage that we're looking how we're interconnecting the existing regional systems. We're really just looking to establish a core skeleton of what a regional system might look like, based on the interconnection of those public systems. We weren't yet looking at the details of how unsewered community clusters might be connected, though I recognize I am talking about them at this point. Okay, so under the next category, the export categories, there were, as I mentioned, the three scenarios included alternative 2A, which was convey all wastewater to Windsor. So all those interconnected systems ultimately to that line that says head off to Windsor. Alternate 2B was convey all wastewater to Santa Rosa's lagoon treatment plant for treatment. Of course, these export options involve a large pipeline going to those facilities. And alternative 2C is export to both Windsor and Santa Rosa, with the northerly portion of the West County heading off to Windsor, the southerly portion heading towards Santa Rosa. And then lastly, I'll get there. Under the combination or hybrid category, the two scenarios was alternative 3A. 3A one of them was 3A. Maintaining the Russian River plant as a local facility, including the Monte and nearby unsewered communities. While the southern portions, the Occidental Forestville Graton systems export to the Santa Rosa treatment plant. And then alternative 3B was the reverse of that, maintain the Forestville Graton concept as a treatment facility and everything in the northern portion, the Monte Russian River, and that corridor going off to Windsor. So those were the 8 initial project concepts that were proposed. 3 in local, 3 export, and 2 combination, and that was presented to our stakeholder group. With those options considered, the early feedback tended to favor 3 alternates, 1A, 2A, and 3B. So 1A being maintaining the 2 local treatment plants as they are. I mean, they'd be modified ultimately, but maintaining them in operation. Alternative 2A was the export everything to Windsor option. And the other favored one, again, this is early weigh-in, was exporting the northern portions, including Russian River, Monte Hernandez, and that corridor to Windsor, and the remainder being treated at a combined Forestville Graton facility. So those 3 favored early on are asterisked on this table. At the same time, or shortly thereafter, 3 alternatives were removed from further advancement in the screening process. Alternative 1B, sending everything to a single local facility at Russian River. That was eliminated quickly, thinking that with the understanding that site is probably too size constrained to accommodate the needed improvements for that alternative. And alternative 2C, exporting to both Windsor and Santa Rosa, recognizing the cost for 2 long pipelines to those separate facilities would be cost prohibitive. And alternative 3A, treating locally at the Russian River plant and exporting the southern portion to Santa Rosa Lagoon treatment plant, recognizing that if we're going to go with any hybrid alternative, the one that is focused around maintaining treatment at Forestville Graton would be preferable, given some of the constraints at Russian River, as well as more potential for recycled water, beneficial reuse of recycled water. So the hybrid that included maintaining Russian River was eliminated early as well. So that left these 5 remaining alternatives that are shown across the top of this table that went through a more detailed scoring and ranking process of certain qualitative criteria that are represented here kind of in the left column, looking at parameters such as reliability, regulatory compliance, environmental considerations, ease of implementation, and the like. And that scoring resulted in the average scores shown here on the bottom line, just kind of skipping to the end there. With the highest scoring alternatives there in the middle, and the lowest scoring alternative being the one that is the local alternative that had 2 treatment plants for qualitative scoring. Then we looked at costs. We looked at estimated costs of those 5 alternatives, which clearly ended up showing that local alternatives have the cost advantage over any of the export hybrid or hybrid alternatives. Capital costs are shown there on the top line, and to build the project, to get the project implemented. Somewhat in the middle here, we have the 20-year life cycle cost, present value. 20-year life, not the present value, but estimated total 20-year life cycle cost. As a summary, so the local alternatives are showing clear cost advantage over the export alternatives. You might also notice that the predominant portion of the total cost for any of those alternatives arises from incorporating the unsewered community cluster. So if you look at any one of the columns, just 1A, for example, if it's a total capital cost of $716 million, $626 million of that was incorporating the unsewered communities, having to build out collection systems in those facilities, extending pipelines to connect to a broader regional system, and then converting people that are on septic, their homes to a sewer service. So laying out both the qualitative and the cost criteria results in a graph such as this, with cost on the bottom, the x-axis, and qualitative scoring on the left or the y-axis. We tend to see favored alternatives tending toward the upper left, having lower cost and higher qualitative score, and least favored alternatives tending toward the lower right or lower right quadrant, having higher cost and lower qualitative score. So the arrow is pointing us in the direction from least to most favorable. So plotting these alternatives on this graph, the local facility alternatives 1A and 1C are seen to be the most cost effective. They're on the left side of the graph. Whereas the other, the export alternatives are all shown far to the right. So, and further, alternative 1C is showing higher values for the qualitative criteria, suggesting that it to be the more favored alternative among the five. Almost done here. I think this is almost my last slide. So based on these findings, however, there is another alternative concept that later arose that has since been thought to be worthy of consideration as well, and was assessed at some level at a more cursory level by the consultant because it came later in the game. Alternative 1A that I've been talking about was predicated on a certain assumption that the combined Forestville Graton plant would be converted to a zero discharge plant. So no longer discharging treated winter flows to tributary streams of the Russian River. And that was based on preference of the Graton Forestville entities to want to move that direction. However, that's when we looked at this modified alternative 1A that proposes to construct a biological nutrient removal process at what would be a future Forestville Graton treatment facility, and continue with the existing wintertime tributary discharges. And that modified alternative 1 is thought to provide qualitative scoring more similar to alternative 1C, and also realizing the cost benefits of alternative 1A. So there is a in the frequently asked question, the FAQ that's available here. There's a deeper discussion of what assessment was done with that modified alternative 1A, but that may end up being one of the favored or the favored alternative. I was making reference to the FAQ to get you more information on some of the thinking that was behind that alternative. Nonetheless, because it came later in the game, it was not as fully vetted as the other alternatives, but some description of it was included in the updated feasibility study that's been submitted to the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and will become part of the project advancement report as that phase moves forward. So to wrap up, our next stakeholder meeting, as I mentioned, is coming this week on Wednesday. It is a virtual meeting and the public is welcome to join. Meetings are facilitated by a third-party facilitator through Sacramento State Center for Continuing Education. I might highlight that we apparently won't at this time have the continuing benefit of Ms. Brenda Edelman representing Russian River Watershed Protection Committee, who has followed and attended our committee meetings thus far for this project, and for years, of course, has been engaged as a leader and collaborator on matters related to protecting the river. So please feel welcome to help fill that gap left behind in the absence of Brenda and her valuable input as she steps away from that role. So again, this is our website. If you want more information, we have the handouts, and that's what I had to present on that subject today. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And so we'll go ahead, round of applause. And thank you for bringing up Brenda. And I also want to say a thank you to Todd, who actually drafted a beautiful full resolution that we hope to bring before the Board of Supervisors honoring Brenda's many decades of work. So we'll let you know when that's got a date and a time, and we're working with her to find out whether she'd like to come to the board or whether we'd like to post something out in West County for her. So With that, questions? And anticipating one question, which is, do you have money for this? The answer is no. So, you know, a lot of people are like, why haven't we solved wastewater in West County? It's like, well, do you have a check for $1 billion? Because if you do, I can absolutely solve the problem. Absent that, this is going to, you know, require substantial external funding. Any questions? Yeah.
To what extent does climate change and how the environment is going to change around here affect, how is that affected the kind of planning that you're doing and the consideration that you're giving to different alternatives?
Yeah, a couple key elements that were looked at with this study was one, the rises in the river during major storm events and what facilities might be more susceptible to flooding. I think about the Russian River plant that we maintain. And you know, so which facilities are more susceptible to those types of rises from storm events. The concept of recycled water and drought associated with climate change, and the availability of recycled water for water supply, some option. Consideration was given to how beneficial various alternatives would be helping to address those types of challenges. Those were kind of the two focus areas. Todd, I don't know if you remember other elements.
No, those were the key ones. The cost estimates were so skewed by the idea of exporting to Windsor and Santa Rosa that it makes total sense to invest in the infrastructure that we currently have in place. You know, Windsor and Santa Rosa needed upgrades to their treatment facilities if we're going to connect there, and then they were going to charge us for connecting too. So it was like it just didn't make any sense economically. But in addition, having that much additional pipeline plays a, you know, is influenced by climate change as well for long-term operations and payments.
I think I have a question. Sorry, I think I saw in the PowerPoint we saw online, not this one, one that's just part of the study, a slide that showed cost per parcel, potentially per parcel, and it was in points of a million. I couldn't understand how I couldn't understand what actually the cost would be.
Yeah, I should point out, so that information can be found in the feasibility study. It is accessible on our website.
And that provides one yet.
Oh, it's very close. I think we're remediating it.
Yes.
Okay, but it'll be very soon available there. I think the chart you're referring to, I think there was a range of costs thrown in decimals of millions,
Yes.
right? So that range of costs, I think it was like per ESD, so equivalent single family dwelling. So if you were a single family dwelling, a typical single family dwelling, you typically assign one ESD, and so that chart was cost per ESD. Crude estimates at this stage, of course, and I think it ranged somewhere from the high 100,000s to the mid 200,000s per ESD. And of course, that's high. If there was no external funding, that's what it would run. So moving this forward, something like this forward is highly dependent upon where can we find state and federal funding to move a concept this costly along. So those numbers would be highly dependent in the end by what external funding could help with the process.
Thank you.
Hi, Megan from Russian River Rec and Park District, and we share some property with you guys, pumping stations and whatnot. What about the infrastructure until then? Because this community and everybody downriver is impacted when things go wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's the plan? How are we communicating? How are we doing all of those other things?
I guess I'm trying to get a sense of, in particular, I mean, there are various activities that we're engaged in, are you talking like in response to like following the spill, and what are we doing about?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And other emergencies as they come up.
Right. So there are many fronts that we recently had this bill in January. We had 4 million gallons per day coming into a plant has a permitted wet weather design for 3.5 million gallons per day. We have actually in the past managed to pass flows at that level. But there are other circumstances that were occurring at the time too, not the least of which was apparently compromised biology in the plant from the storm that preceded it, not long before it. There were some operational issues, valves that weren't able to get closed, and manholes, a couple manholes, I believe, that were found to be open. So kind of from an SOP standpoint, storm preparation that we're looking at. There's an inflow and infiltration study we'll be conducting later this year to look in more detail on that. There are a number of things in this spill didn't happen in the collection system where we've had spills in the past. This was in the treatment facility. There are a number of elements. We're looking at the filters, our aeration basins. There are some pinch points in the system that are all on our radar to try to move forward. There's an equalization basin we're looking for. These are not all funded projects. These are directions that they're looking to try to address some of the challenges. But ultimately we got flows larger than that plant is designed to handle presently. So I actually give a lot of credit to our operations folks when they're able to pass flows larger than what that plant is designed to handle. But we are trying to make it be able to handle more and ultimately get it permitted to handle more as well.
And one thing I would mention is that David Royal is actually going to be coming to the MAC in August to actually go into detail about the existing plant, and also to provide an overview of, what went wrong in that plan, we're going to do to change it. It is not official, but I will kind of let you know that we are anticipating a very substantial award from the state, which will actually not be a loan, but will be a direct investment into the Russian River County Sanitation District. It will not actually address the concerns that were sort of brought to light by the most recent spill. This is actually really, though, addressing a lot of the concerns that we saw in the 2019 spill. So hopefully we'll fund close to $50 million worth of work on the collection system. But it's not final until it's final. So we're really crossing our fingers. We've been told that 47 million is coming, but we do not have it signed. And so we're hoping that in the next couple of weeks, that'll be buttoned up and we'll be able to really share that publicly and shout out from the mountaintops. That's a big investment coming into the system. Any follow-up questions, Megan, before we go?
Really quickly, just a potential for collaboration here. There was a lot of confusion in our community and the emergency communications were lacking for most of us, especially for people who are not familiar with the area, who were traveling at a time and maybe staying in second homes that they're not in frequently over holidays or different times. But some of the things that we've seen from other emergency communications would have benefited letting people know, don't go down the river, don't go do these different things, anytime there's sewage.
Right. So we did try to, there was communication with county emergency management, with environmental health. We have an alert system that people who are signed up for get alerts. So recognize that signage was put up in certain locations. But yeah, there was some scrambling to get the messages out to people who need to hear it. Andrea, is there anything on that aspect of it you care to add?
Utilize a lot of platforms, between Nextdoor, the opt-in for the Russian River County sanitation customers, utilizing our county partners. We do try and use a couple different platforms, but it is sort of, as you said, it can be pockets.
All right, a couple more quick questions and then we'll move on to our next presentation.
Thank you. A few questions that came up for me. I'm in Forestville, and so I think of the Forestville Water District. And I'm personally on water and sewer. And when you're going over everything and looking at kind of the plan, one thought is, I'm assuming that it's not all going to be funded by grants and everything. Do you foresee that a substantial amount will impact your customers in the area? And if you're bringing in folks that are currently on septic, is there going to be an education and then have to be a buy-in? I'm just looking at the big picture of how you get everyone on the same kind of alignment, if this is the plan. So I'm curious about that. And then this is just a side note. I don't know if you have anything about this, but I've often wondered, with waste sewer plants, have there ever been any studies about the home consumer and what they're putting in the water and what might be best, from just detergents and dyes and et cetera. I'm just wondering if you ever do any education outreach. That's a side question on that.
Sure. Okay, I'll try to remember those. With regards to, I mean, let me see if I can flip back to the costs here. So you can see for any one of let's look at that second line down, Russian River share, or the next line down, the Forestville Graton share. Yeah, there are definitely costs associated with those small districts that are substantial costs. I mean, if we look at the Russian River, for example, if we went with the alternative 1C, there's a couple $100 million of costs that we would certainly be looking for grants. But to your point, yes, it's very possible grants aren't going to pay for all of it. So that would have a significant impact on rates if, depending on how much local match the local entity would have to provide. Those are unknown and really need to be, those are great questions that need to be explored in this project advancement phase in particular. These are daunting challenges financially that we don't have all the answers for right now. We're putting costs around it and trying to understand how might we go about trying to make this happen or elements of this. This could be a long-term phased process. So yes, it could translate to rate effects.
Yeah, and one thing that I want to mention, so Forestville is different, and that there's an independent water district board, and so you all actually do cover all of your costs. But for Guerneville and for Occidental, those are actually, even though the rates are extraordinarily high, actually heavily subsidized by the general fund, because it does not actually cover the true cost of operation, let alone the costs that are required by state mandated upgrades. And that's really the problem with all of these small systems, is that, you know, they were functioning fine when they were built, the standards that were built at that point in time. You know, over time, the state standards have gotten stricter and we don't have any more people on the system. So it's still a very small, limited ratepayer base with all of these kind of essentially unfunded state mandates for compliance.
Right.
So
Having to pay by the property tax as well.
Seeing that, yes.
Extra bill just for that.
Yeah, we have two more presentations to get through, so maybe we just do a lightning round of questions. If you keep questions really short and like a sort of 60-second answer. Also, with respect to education, there are a lot of education for the water agencies programs, and I'm sure that Andrea would be helpful, happy to help you and kind of point you in the right direction for that stuff afterwards.
I think as many of us are elected, it's hard to get up and have some positive and good news, right? Never mind the blind side, as Chris Tachouet was saying, who knew that fire services might be constrained by the septic systems of this. Anyway, the good news is, perhaps some of you know that almost all the methane that's generated from the dumps that are down goes to our sewer plant in Santa Rosa, and they take that, scrub it, and mechanically generate electricity. And then they use the electricity to UV degrade all the nasties and germs. Well, right around the corner, there's some real technology that's coming. The Nobel Prize, for instance, was just awarded using, instead of converting methane into fuels for internal combustion, they're going to put it through some membrane, a filter, and turn it into water and wastewater. Rather than use the 25 million gallons a day, for instance, that comes to Santa Rosa, that carries all of that. A lot of that might go, I won't say go away, but there are some technological hopes that in the next 50 years will really change things on how we deal with water and wastewater. And the good news is, again, as leaders, one of the things we have to figure out is, yes, the costs are astronomical, but there is some good news, I think, down the road, because technology is changing so rapidly. And as leaders, what we need to do is keep informed about that. See what the applications are. Encourage the leaders of the technology areas to embrace some of those. And I think, and I'll be dead blunt, and probably most of the people in here but there really are some good news coming down the pipe. Instead of using the old Roman system of using water to transport waste, it's gonna change. I mean, we're already sending electricity using lasers from satellites down to the earth. So it's pretty amazing what's happening. Anyway, I hope that's good news.
We could use some silver bullets, so for sure.
You'd be, it is shocking how they are up there.
All right, okay, last question, real quick.
Thank you. From our water district perspective, not the sewer district, we draw our water supply from wells that are located near the Russian River. In other words, we're extracting groundwater from the Russian River and we're treating it and then we're selling it to our customers. Have you looked in the studies of exporting the wastewater completely out of, in other words, untreated wastewater completely out of our watershed? Would that have a negative impact on that groundwater and possibly affect our cost of drawing water from the underground water supply?
If we shipped, so like under the export scenarios here, if we shipped it out of the.
Yeah, it's leaving our watershed and it's being disposed of somewhere else.
Right, well, what I will point out, and I didn't highlight here in this overview, is that one of the goals there was also, like, if you look at this bottom line total, the concept of returning the recycled water to West County, because that was an objective to try to keep the water in the West County area, not ship it outside. So the bottom line cost, for the local options, it's not an issue, but there's the additional cost added to bring it back. So the regional board, in fact, expressed that as a priority for them to try to ensure that we kept water inside in the watershed. So it wasn't necessarily a core objective to look at shipping it out, but it could have impacts, unintended consequences that would be undesirable. It was not something studied in detail for this study.
Thank you for flagging that out. That's just something I flagged too, because I'm like, I sort of think like someone who lives on septic, which I do, right? Which is that like, okay, you're pulling the water up, but you're also sending it right back. And so the idea of exporting all of that, outside of West County and kind of didn't sit right with me either. All right, is your question super fast?
No.
No, okay, great. Can you hold it to the end? Is that okay? You're gonna hold it against it, we can move forward on this conversation, is that all right? Okay. All right, we're gonna go ahead, thank you so much again, and really. I'm going to hand it over to Sarah Court, who is joining us remotely from RSG Consultants, who's going to talk a little bit about our district formation and the introduction of a governance toolkit for unincorporated communities.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. And just want to make sure you can also see my presentation.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. All right. Well, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me today. I just have a brief presentation. We're doing an update on the district formation advisory services. My name is Sarah Court with RSG. We are a community development consulting firm that works with California cities, counties, and unincorporated communities on planning, implementation, and various economic development, fiscal health, housing, and policy considerations. Like I said, we're here to provide just a brief update on the district formation advisory services effort, what it is, what we've done so far, and what's coming next as we kind of wrap up the engagement. All right, so the County of Sonoma partnered with our team at RSG to support unincorporated communities in exploring ways to enhance local services. So this effort, which we're formally calling the District Formation Advisory Services, is centered around a few key priorities. First, helping communities clearly identify their service needs and priorities. And second, making sure that there's accessible and practical information about the tools that are available to address those needs. So whether that's forming a district, expanding services, or exploring other governance options. That's kind of what the project and purpose entails. So overall, the project isn't intended to prescribe any specific solution, but rather give communities the information they need to discuss and make informed decisions. So to do that, the county took a targeted and community-driven approach. The county allocated funding for this effort and led outreach in coordination with each supervisor district office to identify interested MACs, citizen advisory councils, and community groups to participate. From there, communities that expressed interest and readiness to have these discussions were identified as priority areas for the engagement. We then started with some initial exploratory meetings in each priority area, followed by more tailored support based on the community's expressed priorities. I'll also just note that the engagement approach was designed with, available time, budget, and community capacity in mind. So the effort really focused on targeted high impact engagement rather than kind of extended or ongoing work in any one area that we were working with. And finally, the resources and tools developed through the process are being consolidated and shared countywide to support other unincorporated communities that might be interested in exploring these options in the future. All right, so we worked with a wide range of communities across the county, each kind of at a different stage of discussion. So I'll just kind of briefly go through some of the engagements that we had in some of the priority areas. In the Graton community, we facilitated a workshop focused on expanding services beyond wastewater, including a discussion of what it would take both operationally and financially to expand service delivery into areas like recreation. In North Sonoma Valley, we facilitated both a board workshop and a more technical working session where we walked through governance options, the LAFCO process, and considerations for a successful LAFCO application. And for the Lower Russian River area, we provided information to the Monte Rio Recreation and Park District on various governance pathways and some feasibility considerations tied to expanding service delivery. We also connected with several other communities at an earlier stage in the project where the focus was on introducing the project, understanding initial interest, though not all of these efforts progressed beyond those initial conversations. But overall, these efforts really reinforced that the communities that we were working with are not all in the same place and that there's a need for flexible tools and engagement strategies as communities talk about their next steps. All right, so the work that we are doing now is ultimately leading to two key community resources that will be published. The first is a governance toolkit for unincorporated communities, which will be available soon online. I think there are some printed copies there in the building that will be distributed after the presentation, so you can take a look. And it's currently being translated before being posted on the county's website. So the toolkit is really intended to be a practical starting point for unincorporated communities. It walks through the range of governance structures, different service delivery options that are available, and outlines some of the key considerations for each. So it's really designed to be useful at a range of different stages, whether a community is just starting to think about these types of processes or is already exploring specific options, by helping them ask the right questions and narrow in on what might make the most sense for their needs and their capacity. The second deliverable centers around case studies and insights from the priority areas that we engaged with in the process. So highlighting the pathways that different communities considered, some of the constraints they may have encountered, and key lessons around feasibility and implementation. So these case studies are kind of intended to ground, what can sometimes feel like an abstract process in real world examples and kind of better understand what it takes to move these different options forward, where challenges might arise, what to expect when they kind of consider a path of their own. So together, these resources are intended to be useful for a wide range of unincorporated communities. Those who might not be familiar with governance options at all, to those that, are actively exploring ways to enhance their local services, will be able to benefit from these tools that are being created. All right, so that's all I have for you today. We're excited to share these resources more broadly in the coming weeks, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about the project or the progress to date.
Great, thank you so much, Sarah. Any questions? Sukey.
I see Debbie, you sat me here next to Lucas. Yeah. So Sarah, you're coming in to give us this presentation almost 2 hours into our session. We haven't had a break. So I'm gonna ask you, you throw a lot of information at us at a very high and abstract level. Can you give us some concrete examples of some of the things that you're talking about? I don't see any now here, but were you involved in actually doing the study of doing the tether? Were you involved in working with any of the communities that are talked about?
Are you asking if I was specifically involved with some of the efforts in the priority areas?
Actually, let me put it a little bit differently. Can you give us an anecdote that gives us a little more sense of what went on in the study, or what we find all about? These may be beyond.
Yeah, so I think what you're asking is just a little more insights into some of the areas that we worked with and kind of how that process, what that process looked like. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, let me just go back here. So basically we kind of approached it in a two-phased approach. The first phase was connecting with local leadership in each of the areas that expressed interest in participating in this process. So for example, with the Graton community, we met with a few board members to kind of just better understand local priorities, what, service enhancements that they might be looking at. In Graton in particular, they were looking at expanding their services from solely wastewater to recreation and oversight of a town hall. So that kind of gave us an idea of what kind of tailored support that they needed to, succeed with their goals of expanding their services. So we had kind of a second workshop with them where we went through, the operational and fiscal considerations as they're expanding services to kind of help provide information and, high level considerations as they move forward that they could use to practically make sure that their transition was a success. So we've kind of followed that two-phase approach in each of the areas that we worked with, kind of having that initial conversation and getting a sense of the priorities in the community, and then providing that tailored workshop or resources to kind of help them navigate where they're at and considerations for a path forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Any other questions from folks? One thing that I do want to mention is kind of how this was funded, and there is actually an ongoing revenue stream that has been programmed into the county budget called the District Formation Fund. And it's a small percentage of the transient occupancy tax, and it's a set aside. And that is what we use to actually create the Lower Russian River Governance Study, which is kind of what led to this meeting, because they actually recommended having a council of governments, that meets once or twice a year that gets together to have these common conversations. And so if there are, individual districts who are looking at, maybe I might want to go through a LAFCO process. Maybe I want to, consider annexation or call it consolidation, or maybe I want to add, as Graton has sort of like looking at how do we expand into recreation services. You would likely need something that is more detailed than this high level survey. And so, please reach out to us. We can refer you appropriately to the CEO's office. That, some of that funding had been pre-programmed for a number of years, so I'm not sure exactly what fiscal year, that funding opens up or what the current balance in the account is. But we do have our budget presentations next week, and I can ask them. And we also have our budget deliberations happening in June. So if anyone has any interest in that from your specific district, please let us know. And I know that we have gone a while without a break. There are sparkling waters and snacks back there, but I feel like this actually segues so perfectly into our next speaker, who is Chief Shepley Shropperry with Gold Ridge. And so this is really actually about him having an opportunity to share what does consolidation look like, sort of stories from the trenches. So thank you so much, Sarah, for the presentation. Really appreciate it and appreciate your work. And if anyone has any questions again about the funding or about this study, that is why Hannah is in the audience back there. And so you can talk to her afterwards about that. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to the chief. Actually, we're gonna take five. We're gonna take five while we get the PowerPoint presentation up. So go ahead and grab some drinks, grab some snacks. If you have any questions, reach out to the folks who are there to answer.
Good afternoon. Man, I think we've almost done the project or had the conversation already just by being here. So congratulations on starting the first steps of consolidation. And much of the theme will be about networking and communicating with one another and kind of sharing and recognizing that we share challenges, all of us, regardless of how we're serving our community. We all have similar challenges. We already talked about infrastructure, funding, governance, PRMP. So there's some themes out there that we can all share. So I'm going to start with an overview of where we were, and actually this is a depiction of what we've become at the Gold Ridge Fire District. Shepley Shropperry Fire Chief, Gold Ridge Fire. This is a depiction of the consolidation, starting with the 1993 consolidation, what was Twin Hills, Freestone, and Hessel. That's what formed the Gold Ridge Fire District. And then in July of 2023, through coordination with the County of Sonoma, we annexed the CSA 40 territories, which consisted of Fort Ross, Camp Meeker, Bodega, Two Rock, Valley Ford, Wilmar, and Lakeville. And then more recently, completed in July 2025, the consolidation and annexation of the city of Sebastopol and Monterey Fire District. So kind of a core map. We're working on our mapping, but the fire district reaches to the northernmost portion of our fire district is up on Tin Barn Road, where we border Northern Sonoma County Fire District, or North Coast Fire District, Timber Cove, and that's our Fort Ross response area. Then coming down the hill, if you will, we now have Monterey and Camp Meeker. We hopscotch over Occidental, and then the rest of the fire districts contiguous all the way down to the county line in Petaluma. So again, I kind of went through this background. One important thing is contractor services, and you'll see that play out in my brief slideshow. But contractor services, I'll call it gateway towards consolidation. And it's a very good way to recognize, share services, and then recognize whether or not you're good partners. And that's how many of much of our consolidation started. Contract service agreement with Monterey was one example, and then contract service with the county to manage the CSA 40 areas. And that took place over 3 years. It was really meant to be a 1 year process. But the reality of consolidation, again, another important theme is the time it takes, the effort it takes, and kind of the seed of consolidation starts much like this conversation, but in some cases for us, 20 years prior to actually being successful. So many of these things that happened were set in motion 20 plus years ago, if not even 30 years ago. And I have a little depiction of that. This is a letter written to the city manager of Sebastopol in 2022, I believe. And that was when we really started in earnest working towards consolidation. And the reason I put this slide up is the last paragraph in this is ultimately the most important outcome of consolidation of our two agencies is that our community will receive the benefit of a sustainable, community-minded, dedicated and professional emergency response. While we look forward to the next steps, we should always ask the question, how can we best serve the public? That's true regardless of what you're serving, when you start to explore consolidation. The other important part of this is, if the work is pure and the efforts are vetted and analyzed appropriately. Larry McLaughlin was the city manager when we started, but he wasn't at the end of the consolidation. In fact, we went through 2 other city managers prior to completion of the consolidation. So people come and go, but the work has to be vetted and purposeful and clear-eyed on what you're trying to accomplish, keeping the public in mind as the number one goal, how we better serve them. Time takes longer than you think. Meetings, consistent meeting schedule is important and helpful. And at one point with Monterey and Sebastopol simultaneously working on consolidation with both, that meant that my board members who were in the room, they were having sometimes weekly consolidation ad hoc conversations to get through all the feelings that are involved in consolidation. And so I'm not trying to make light of feelings or even joke about feelings, but there's a lot of feelings, there's a lot of ego, there's a lot of history in this room, as we know, right? So you have to put a lot of those things aside and be clear-eyed on that focus goal of how we best benefit the community. The other thing that happened in the fire service, and I'll touch on this and maybe go in more in depth, depending on the appetite for it and how much time we want to spend. But the environment for consolidation can be forced, but it can only occur when the conditions are right. And sometimes, in our case, we had one of the key factors addressed, and that was funding through Measure H. That was and also the effort of the county to do something about fire service in the rural community. So there was a lot of funding effort that went in to make the environment right and the opportunity right to complete consolidation. So we can talk about all the studies, and we can talk about sewer and water and how it's going to be $100 million to accomplish this. And it could be a perfect idea, but it can't happen until all the conditions are right. And when I move into talking about LAFCO, funding is going to be a key component to delivering a sustainable service. And so in some way, the point is you can't force these things, but what I fear for a lot of us is sometimes these happen because something has failed. We've gotten to the breaking point, and now consolidation is almost forced or inevitable or the only option. That's not ideal, but that is also in some ways a way a condition comes right is failure. But I don't think anything that we are delivering to our communities can fail. So that it really, I encourage people to always consider consolidation or reorganization as an option and a solution to some of the increasing problems that we all encounter. I'll go back to feelings. Words matter. So consolidation, annexation, and reorganization all sound very different, right? They're essentially the same thing, but reorganization, if you present it that way, like we are reorganizing the services that we deliver in a manner that become more efficient and more beneficial to the community, that doesn't sound as scary as we are being annexed by X agency. So words really matter, and approach really matters as we explore these endeavors. Again, I shared that the shared service or JPA model is often a very good step. It can be the immediate solution to some of the challenges we encounter. If it's sharing an employee, sharing equipment, sharing purchasing power, these all might be, and maybe they're already occurring, but they're ways to recognize the benefits and also become less afraid of change, if you will, because you become more familiar with your partners. But again, they involve a LAFCO process. Labor and the community both are important components of this process. And we didn't always recognize all the stakeholders in our first process with the CSA 40 territories. Every volunteer, every community member was somebody that we needed to have outreach with. We hired consultants, we would hold community meetings.
we do all those things, but were we completely effective at our outreach? I'd say probably not. I mean, we tried, told meetings, we tried to invite the public to things, but, it's a hard mark to hit, and there's always gonna be somebody that feels disenfranchised or left out of the plan. But we certainly tried, and I'm not saying that I'd do differently, but I put more effort into that community engagement, and labor engagement, earlier in the process, because it makes the end result, or the path a lot easier at the end if you, do that up front. And then governance, that's where a lot of the ego, that's a lot of the fear comes out. And I'm looking at a room of people who govern these places, and I had a really good conversation about how at the end of the day, we want what's best for our community and how we serve our community. But along with that, there's a lot of loss of purpose or sense of loss. And so when you're having these conversations, just be clear about what the governance is going to be. There's also restrictions. An example is with Sebastopol, the city council, they wanted to have some form of governance in the future fire district, or once they were annexed by the fire district. And just legally, that wasn't an option, until they run and find themselves on the board. There's often discussion about expanding the size of the board. And there's pros and cons to that. So there's a whole host of feelings around governance. But I found that the best thing we did was just be clear that this is the governance, this is how it's gonna work. And your opportunity to serve or govern the fire district will exist in the next open seat. I know Sonoma County Fire District, I think, blended a 5-person board with some of the agencies that they brought in to form a 7-person board, if I remember correctly. So that's a good opportunity. But then when you start to talk about a 9-person board and on, it starts to be problematic. So just have a plan about governance beforehand. And then LAFCO. Hopefully everybody's familiar with LAFCO. If you're not familiar with LAFCO, sometimes just attending meetings, regardless if it has anything to do with what you're governing. I wish I had more familiarity and understanding of LAFCO, the LAFCO process. And then also engage the staff at LAFCO as well as the commission. And if you entertain even JPAs and shared services, generally or should serve or share some conversation with LAFCO. So LAFCO is, for lack of a better term, from my perspective, was the referee. That once all this work had been done, we presented our plan to LAFCO. They're the agency that says, yes, you have a viable plan, you have a sustainable plan, you have a plan that is going to be funded and makes sense, and you're going to deliver a better service at the end of this reorganization. But without having engaged LAFCO beforehand, it would be, and having a better understanding of LAFCO, it can be very difficult. So if you entertain the idea of consolidation or even a JPA or anything remotely like that, you should become very familiar with LAFCO. In our case, 25% voters, so this is depicting the protest period and the process once the plan was placed. We go through proceedings with LAFCO, there's the vote, or in some cases, what people would argue is a lack of a vote. And this is when you are overlaying a tax. This is required that property owners and registered voters are noticed and given an opportunity to protest the proceeding. In our case, we never wrote a double digit in return protest for the reorganization. And in both cases, especially in the case of the reorganization of CSA 40, we were applying a tax over an area that had not ever had a special tax applied to them for fire service. In the case of Monte, our tax, in some cases, there were homeowners that actually had a tax rate decrease, and others a slight increase or nearly the same. But in any case, this is the process that the residents and registered voters have to protest the consolidation. July 1st just happens to be a very convenient time, but if you were to build a roadmap backwards on when you wanted to complete a consolidation process, aligning with the fiscal year is actually very critical. and important to be engaged with LAFCO to know when those times align, so that as you go into a new fiscal year, both employees and just the votes are cleaner and it's easier. You can do it at a different time of year, but it's very beneficial to align with July 1st effective reorganization date. And then there's a whole bunch of other regulatory and processes that caught us off guard at times, or we assumed they were dealt with, but they were not. In fact, Board of Equalization, mapping and tax rate areas are all kind of things that we not fell into or missed, but they're very easy to overlook if you're not familiar with the process. So mapping in particular, it was easy, relatively easy for fire districts because service areas existed and tax rate areas existed on our boundaries. It got a little muddy in the northern portion of our fire district in the Fort Ross territory because parcel lines and properties are large and the mapping was just not as accurate. So we spent a lot of money, well, the county spent a lot of money on mapping and surveying and correcting fire district boundaries and knowing which parcels were included, which ones weren't, and which ones were dissected by the fire districts. So that can be problematic because that's a big component of what the Board of Equalization means is an accurate map of the tax of the fire district and then ultimately the tax area. And then this is just, I took slides from previous conversations. These are benefits specific to fire service as an example. But I prior to this coming here, I thought a lot about how this could be applicable to anybody, a water agency, a park and rec department. And, you know, it's not a surprise that sharing admin is a cost savings. Sharing mid and upper level management's cost savings. And then organizations, as we find, standalone entities are having a harder and harder time, regardless of what you're providing. If it's an HR department that you lack, if it's the ability to quickly hire people, if labor retention becomes problematic because you are a one horse town, if you will, and you don't have depth in your labor, these are all benefits that aren't as obvious, but exist and help steer the direction of the consolidation to answer that question. Why are we doing this and how does it ultimately benefit the community? But at the same time, there's a certain inefficiency to getting bigger. So that I would say there's an arc where it no longer is the right solution. And we kind of saw that with the conversation about sewer is should it be one place or should it be two places? Is a regional solution the right solution? Is it one massive fire district? Is it one massive sewer district? Maybe, maybe not, but those are kind of the conversations that we had along the way. Again, we fell into things like apparatus. How do you share apparatus? How do you hand over titles of apparatus? Some apparatus was bought by nonprofits. There are just so many things that once you get into a consolidation process, the weeds get pretty thick about ownership, land ownership. We've experienced all of those things. Again, there's not really a way to get ahead of it other than those meetings and having a clear plan moving forward. Again, this is more just discussions that we had, talking about benefits. Fire station ownership became a very big topic with the city of Sebastopol when we went through the consolidation of them. And then this will maybe talk a little bit about Measure H and broadly about the fire service. And one of the strengths and one of the advantages I'd say we have is the Fire Chiefs Association meets on a monthly basis, and every fire chief just about in the county talks about and shares the challenges that we encounter. And from those types of meetings, we were successful in passing Measure H. And with the Fire Service Working Group, as an ad hoc, we would meet weekly, and we ultimately generated a tax measure that generates $64 million by this year for all the fire agencies in the county. And so, funding is gonna be a key component when you're sitting there before LAPCO and making your plan, you have to have funding. And so our funding and the reason some of these consolidations was made possible was because of Measure H, because of the County of Sonoma, and because of our beneficial parcel tax. So those are kind of our three funding sources combined. But we had to have a plan, we had to depict where the funding was coming from. We had to portray a sustainable funding source to LAFCO. I'm very proud of the fire service and their ability to come together. We have a certain advantage because we had catastrophic events occurring. We had no option other than to figure it out. We had a ton of help from the county as well to make Measure H possible. But I would say those conversations started 30 years ago, 20 years ago with the Citygate study. I mean, we had a number of studies that said, hey, regionalizing fire service and finding a funding source is going to be critical. And it took a long time, but that's what we did. And then two key pictures. But the significance of these pictures are back to the feelings. If you see the fire engine with the two young boys, it says Twin Hill Station, and then the 9471 engine is a Gold Ridge engine, newly rebranded from Wilmar Fire Department with the community name on it. And while it sounds minor, when you start to talk about fire service and feelings and community pride and community all those things, that was a very critical part of our conversations. It was a theme, regardless of if it was our consolidation with the CSA 40 territories, Sebastopol, and of course Don Rio. So I didn't want to get into the weeds of the mechanics of consolidation, but rather just share that it's possible, and it really starts with conversations like this. And I would encourage. I mean, I could talk to you about all the challenges, but I'm not going to. But I would be happy with the resource if anybody ever started to entertain the idea. I think, like I said, there's a sweet spot. I'm saying that you need one sewer district, but probably need fewer. And park and rec departments, I can think of just off the top of my head hundreds of different ways to save money, sharing tractors, sharing employees, sharing admin staff. I mean, it really is because nothing's getting easier. Nothing we do is getting easier. So that's it.
Thank you so much. So we will go ahead and open it up to questions. I do want to say, you know, there may be a little bit of leading the witness here, but there is absolutely no one who is going to force you to take on more or to consolidate or anything like that, right? This is really just, hey, we have these resources in our community of someone who has the battle scars and the arrows in his back as he left the LAFCO meetings and all of those things to prove it. And so if you've got questions, you know, this is a possible path forward. I want to say that I've been very consistent in my policy, and the county was consistent in its policy, and the county said we will never force people to consolidate. However, if you all want money from us, go find a dance partner, because we can't field 20 different requests for funding. And so that was kind of part of the conversation. Money has always been part of the conversation. Efficiency and economies of scale have always been part of the conversation. So any questions? Yeah.
So along those lines of feelings, I have heard expressed out in the community, various communities, that they fear annexation more than consolidation. And it's because a lot of our communities are very, very proud of the uniqueness of their cultures, of their communities. So can you talk a little, did that happen? And for instance, were, you know, firefighters from one district worried about what was good, you know, all of that, the people part of it. Can you talk to that a little bit?
All of that exists. All of that was said. All of that is something we had to work through. And it's true. Change is scary, right? No matter what. If it's good change, bad change, it's always scary. So there's always a sense of loss. So that's where engaging the labor or engaging the community is super important. Now, to some extent, they have to take you at face value, and they might express a fear, say, well, you're gonna close my station, you're gonna take my fire engine, you're gonna. And sometimes the answer is, yeah, I am, because that's gonna be a better, more efficient way to deliver the service. And in other cases, you do things intentionally, just say, no, this is the plan going forward. So in the case of the volunteer, which I had a lot of, who said, oh, I'm not gonna have an opportunity to do X, Y, and Z. Well, I'll challenge them and say, no, actually, you're gonna have more of an opportunity. You're gonna have now 6 stations that you can go to on that. So that when you're at work, or if you don't remain living, and I've had cases where, a great example is I had a Sebastopol volunteer who many of the young people in Sebastopol don't own, so he now rents a home in Petaluma. Well, guess what? We have a station just outside of town in Petaluma in our Wilmar station, so he volunteers out of that station. So that's an example of change that might have sounded scary, but actually had a benefit. So you just have to, be clear about, yeah, there are things that you're gonna lose. In the case of Sebastopol, the volunteers were the fire department. Well, that was great, except now we have a staffed engine company there that responds immediately. And so, yeah, they lost something, but the community gained something, and there is gonna be loss, and it's hard. That's why I'm not everybody's favorite person at times. But when you talk about change and you talk about pride, those are feelings, right? And fear is a feeling. Look at and articulate how it's gonna be better for the community, and then challenge that person that's fearful. Often it's not to be critical of a person expressing fear about change or loss of something. But you say, put your feelings aside and understand and recognize how it's gonna be better for the community. And if the answer is it's going to be, then it will be. And I will say that if Chief Baxman, who's been here for 50 years, is okay with it, then it's probably okay. And so if he, and he might say something else when I'm not in the room, but the reality is, he recognizes the value, and that was a key part of the volunteer. You can have feelings, 2 things can be true. You could not like it, but you could also recognize the value in it. And when we start talking about identity, I had a unique ability to speak to this because I worked for CAL FIRE, CDF for 17 years prior. I've always been a volunteer at Goldridge. But one thing that I could explain to people, we have an advantage in the fire service. People don't care who shows up as much as they care that a red fire engine shows up. But I can take myself and put myself anywhere in the state of California and affect change and help people, right? And that's true. I mean, it doesn't matter what the fire engine says on the side of it. What you care about is that it shows up and with competent people in it. So I don't know if that was a long way of answering the question, but.
One thing I also just want to say that you said earlier was that the fires actually really helped, because it does take trust, right? And we were all on everybody's speed dials, right? Like we were working so closely together between the county, between all the different fire chiefs. And I think that also broke down a lot of like, people were jumping on people's trucks, right? It was, all hands on deck. We literally had an all call where every single apparatus functioning in Sonoma County was deployed, right? And that kind of stuff creates trust and breaks down barriers. This also creates trust, right? Like how do you just get to know people so that when you're in that boardroom or when it's getting tough and you're making those money decisions, that like, that you're all ultimately have the same goal, which is enhanced public service.
I know I was joking, but this is where these conversations I imagine started many years ago. What I did share is that there was a letter, and I'm sorry I didn't find it, but there was a letter from the Twin Hills board chairperson sent to the city of Sebastopol in 1993. And it was not ignored, but it was like, we're good. Well, fast forward 30 years forward, and now Sebastopol, part of the Goldridge Fire District, they just missed the boat 30 years ago.
Their hands, I saw some hands on this side who was raising.
I have a question, if you could share just for a minute, when you talk about consolidating at the level of management, right? I think it maybe went to 3, I'm not sure. But when that happens, can you share lessons? Because I'm not sure how that literally looks spread across however many stations and such. But some of the challenge points and what works well, because what you're talking about staff that suddenly you maybe aren't physically there and you have that. And then just a side note of curiosity is if the firefighters union gets involved in that, if you have a lot to work through with that.
Yes, labor and the union and part of the LAFCO's process and part of the plan has to include a plan that's fair and, you know, the reorganization or annex consolidation, whatever you want to call it, cannot be used to break up labor or diminish labor. It's gotta work in a manner that is in line and fair to labor. So that's much of what LAFCO does also in the plan. So there's much of the plan service addresses that alone. As far as what that slide depicted was just that we came with 3 paid battalion chiefs and we had mid-level management that could be used across the board. So I think a good example of that would be if you had an operations manager at a sewer plant and they don't have to physically be a site, but they manage just one area. Could they also be the management for another site, if you will, and then you have an efficiency, or then you put more effort. In our case, and then we also have a unique advantage because much of what we took over was volunteers. So it wasn't like we were supplanting or just displacing full-time employees. In fact, we were taking full-time employees and just broadening the area that they served because we had built it and it was scalable. But you know, that's part of those feelings. You know, one other thing that will make additional fire service consolidations occur is when there's no longer a fire chief, and it's an opportunity because we can't recruit or retain a fire chief. The next one will probably be at somebody's retirement potentially. So that's another one of those environmental situations that it may only happen when things are aligned just right. But that was really just to depict scale and efficiencies.
Other questions?
So when you implemented consolidation, did you do a phased or staged approach where you had certain functions that were unified first, or did everything get cut over at once?
Kind of both, in the sense of that's where the shared services was really a way to start. So if it was admin, then we shared admin services in Montreal. Prior to that, we were contract services with the county, and in fact, I was the contract fire chief in the city of Sebastopol. So those were 2 and 3 year, and in the case of the CSA 40 area, that was a 3-year process where we were managing those volunteer fire companies. So it was an opportunity for them to get to know us and then start to bring things in alignment with the Gold Ridge Fire District. So I'd say it was phased through the shared service agreement, but the reality of consolidation is once the LAFCO process is approved and certified, that day you are the fire district. And as an example, Sonoma County Fire District is currently providing shared services to Rancho Adobe, who they anticipate to annex and consolidate or reorganize with and bring into the fire district on July 1st. So that's an example of they're providing prevention services and some admin services, and they're even sharing employees. So those are those opportunities where that's that phased approach. So yeah, I guess the answer is yes.
One local example that I want to share is that right now, actually, Forestville Water District and Graton CSD actually have the same administrator. And sometimes there can actually be benefits whether or not you pursue consolidation. Like I will say there is unprecedented level of collaboration happening between those 2 boards, right? Because they have a common administrator. There's unprecedented big picture thinking where they're starting to think about these 2 systems as potentially, you know, hey, maybe you could have the overflow, we could invest in here, you know, so there are things that are kind of laying the groundwork. And I think that you often end up with cost efficiencies, right? When you start those kinds of models.
And it makes the conclusion a lot less scary too, when you have that trust built.
You know each other. Third question.
I think we're blessed, Gold Ridge, to have a chief like we do, and with his management style. But as elected board members, part of your duty is to choose successors and to help people within your organization achieve the future chief operating officer, chief, whatever you want to call them, is probably in your organization. And when you, as a director, go out to interview perhaps candidates because you have vacancy or you have people who want to be on the board, a significant amount of time and thought of board members has to be, where do we want to be in 10 or 20 years? As Schaap was saying, consolidation for us has been a long time coming. And we hope, thanks to this concept, that could be reflected in this group. Again, get the board together to agree, oh, that sounds like a good plan. Let's go for that. And then you'll hire people who can reflect and succeed in selling that. And if nothing else, as board members, that is your primary duty, I think, to look down the future and try to figure out those kind of things and get away from the parochial individual interests. And it pays off. It's paying off now. Like I said, 10-minute response to 5-minute response or 12-minute response, whatever. It's a huge improvement. And hard to argue with that kind of success. I think you probably have some similar, less spills, better water, whatever, less mosquitoes, whatever it is. They're trying to get it so that people can get behind that. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. I guess I felt I'll stick up as a board member who has been representative of the district that was consolidated into a larger district. And now with Sonoma County Fire, as Chief just mentioned, director in a district that is annexing and consolidating Metro Pecos for them, both sides of it. And was effectively shepherded into this when a former board member knocked on my door 10 years ago, asked me to help write a letter so the Russian River could build a fire station, and 10 years later, maybe if all the stars align, we might break ground on a fire station in the next 5 years. But I'm thinking about LAFCO, which you're talking about the process, the protest period and so forth. I've witnessed a couple of those as you have. And I don't think anybody in the room suffers from an excess of, an abundance of people coming to your meetings on a regular basis to voice their opinions. But when you open up a protest period, you do get definitely a subset of local citizenry that comes forward to express opinions. In my experience, has been on the other side of that, very positive. I was wondering if you could talk about, you said you get pretty low numbers of protest letters. Now that you've been through a few of these things, what sort of feedback are you getting from citizens about, how well it's gone, how appreciative they are of, improved quality of service?
Well, luckily, I've only received that feedback, that they're appreciative of the increased level of service. That doesn't mean that I laugh because through the process, it was always about governance and community representation. And I sit at our board meetings with 1 or 2 people from the community. It's the same 1 or 2 people. One of them's, maybe my neighbor. So we did have, we had people that were unhappy or disagreed with the LAFCO process and the concept of consolidation, but that was very short-lived. And then ultimately, the feedback I received is appreciation for the reorganization. It wears off quickly. People have short memory or they don't want to go to a meeting at 7 o'clock at night on the Wednesday. But whatever the case is, it's not to not pay attention to it and be prepared for it, but the reality is if you stay focused and you have a compelling story to tell about the efficiencies and the benefits of consolidation, you're ultimately going to be in the right, and you'll have a very small minority of folks who are opposed to it. One thing that we did prior to the protest period was we did have community engagement and almost treated it, you can't treat it as a tax campaign, but you treat it as an advocacy for the consolidation, and we would hold town hall meetings and engage each community that was coming into the consolidation. So I think that work up front was really important. And then the next touch point that I had expected to see people was we have to hold a tax hearing every year. When we set our budget, and you would have thought that because of all the things that we heard about, oh, you're overlaying this tax in an unfair manner, you would have thought that the room would be full. And we again had like 2 or 3 people who came and said, well, I don't think my parcel should be taxed that way. But that was the extent out of it, you know, 15,000 parcels, that's 2 or 3 people was the extent of what we experienced. So, I kind of, the answer to the question is that if it's the right work, ultimately we'll have a very small minority who are upset about the identity or they're upset about these things. And again, you just share the compelling story of why, and it all goes away pretty quick.
Other questions? Going once, going twice. Thank you so much, Chef.
Thank you.
And just a reminder, as he's closing out, we do have this parking lot, or if you prefer, perhaps it's a bike rack or a transit mall where you can put ideas, you know, and put them on the paper, or if there are any other questions that you want us to tackle, say in future council of governments meetings, you can put that up there on the paper as well. I believe that now we are transitioning to our legally required public comment on the agenda. So if there are any members of the public who wish to comment, you may do so at this time.
Can we do this again, maybe in the end of September, beginning of October? I'm asking all of you that are here, what you think?
I'd like it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
We'll leave it up to you.
So like a couple times a year seems like a good cadence for this, and then we can do sort of, if Debbie's up for that level of work, you know, kind of solicit feedback and we really, the list of topics was really developed by all of you and her outreach. To try to reflect what folks might find interesting. And unfortunately, our school folks couldn't make it today. There's a lot of talk in West County about school consolidation, especially with what's going on in Santa Rosa City Schools. That might be something we can sort of check people's calendars and see if we get back. I'll keep going around for public comments.
So we electeds have had a chance to talk today, but I know that the operations folks who actually do the work, have not had a chance to talk unless they want to talk in public comment. And I'm wondering how much of an appetite there is among our people who do the work, our general managers, our supervisors, or directors, whatever, for getting together in this kind of a situation where they might get to know each other. There might be some synergy among them. I know certainly that Sweetwater Springs feels like there is some synergy in what we do, and public infrastructure does as well. So I just phrase that as a question.
I would look over if anyone wants to come, but one thing that I do want to share is that we actually had our first ever tour of the Forestville and Graton wastewater treatment plants, where we actually brought the plant manager of the Gurnville plant actually, and they literally just in that context of a couple-hour tour, it was like, oh wait, we actually have some extra of that equipment. You could totally have that if you want that, you know. And so I mean, just the small things that happen in terms. So one way might also be to get out of these 4 walls and actually look at sort of tours of some of our different districts and walk around and see if there's anything that we can do that's just as small as common equipment, shared equipment, comparing notes. You know, what are the most biggest challenges you're facing, and that kind of thing. So we could definitely help facilitate or catalyze that if that's helpful to set up some of those. So I'd love to come out also. I mean, it's been a while. I have been to Sweetwater Springs Water District office a number of times and seen the wall of shame of all the really terrible pipes that you guys have. But it might be fun to get out in the field sometime. Yeah, that's a good job. All right, keep it going.
Well, Sukey beat me to it, but I just wanted to share that comment that this is all well and good. We get to meet each other. We know who we are now. We've discussed some issues, but really it's the people that are our general managers, our CEOs, people that are operating, our fire chiefs that are operating. And I'm hoping that there's a mechanism and a willingness for them to get together themselves and to kind of hash these things out. Because as a director, we have power when we work together, but individually we don't have much authority to do anything in our district. So I'm hoping that this will be an impetus for you all your department heads, et cetera, to figure out how you get together and hash some of this stuff out. Thank you.
Other comments? And also open to any comments from anyone in the cheap seats back here. Yeah, no, I'm going once, going twice. All right.
I have a comment. I don't know if I need a microphone here.
Yeah, it'll help with the.
It helps with us too. Yeah. Thanks for being.
Yes, I'm here because of looking into this building, this rich building. Myself, I live down the river myself, and some of my neighbors had real concerns about that. I wasn't really looking into it, and then it had been a while. And I said I would go on the website, and at that time, I was doing that from so-called emergency website, there was one sentence that basically said nothing to see here. They said, oh yeah, sometimes things happen and we have to wait. And I was recently recovering from a heart attack, so I'm not gonna look at it right now. But it's really grateful to go back and see that there is a lot more information and that there's a lot of transparency and people looking into it. It's really great inspiration and a relief to see this kind of collaboration going on and people working together. Because so often you may feel like we're in competition, though. It's not like the community's gonna get overserved. Yeah, how can we share these this is and do all this stuff? And yeah, it's great. Better to understand and see that we're all in this together, who's in this together, whether there's 3 people or 100 holding the very few, that it can be shifted that way. And communication is really key. I'm really grateful for people brought up about communication. In the last 3 years, the best communication I've gotten when I had power outages has been from Xfinity. I drove into town and called AT&T. I looked on their thing where I actually get signal. They say there's no power outage. And then I get a text from Xfinity saying, oh, your power's out. It's estimated to be back then. It's pretty disappointing that that was the best communication that I've gotten. And then a few years ago, the fires, and we're like, the fire's coming down. And we're saying, oh yeah, the fire's coming down through Armstrong Woods. And we're like, well, what about the flames that we're seeing in Jenner? You know, and they were like over there, and then the power was out. But yeah, you just reinforce and highlighting the importance of communication. Really appreciate all your eyes on this, and to see people and hear people collaborating together. I'm really grateful. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And I actually want to give a shout out to both Sonoma Water and Jeff Duvall. If you have any questions about kind of a response to the sewage spill in real time, they both came out. And we're at actually a Russian River math meeting under my county report out. We didn't have time to agendize it, but we were able to provide real-time information to the community. So if you want to kind of see what that was like, that's up on our website and online.
Right.
So yeah, but thank you very much for all the feedback. Anyone else? Man.
I want to simply encourage us all to attend each other's meetings. I know it's one more evening, and for some reason, we all really like Wednesdays. But Russian River actually Park is the 3rd Wednesday. We're at the senior center at 6 p.m. I'm going to make an effort to come to other meetings. I know I stopped going to MAC meetings when they stopped being on Zoom. But I'm going to try and do that too. I think we would all benefit from it.
Yeah, there's still.
Megan, I have a question for you. Are your meetings hybrid? Can people attend? Okay, and then, fun fact, the math meetings are all hybrid, so you can watch them on Zoom.
I will say, having been through many public meetings, it's sometimes nice to have friendlies in the audience too, right? Like, I could be like, oh, you're actually here because we want to engage, and it's not just, right, sometimes the regulars who might not be quite as in tune with what's actually going on. So I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
I just wanted to share the fire districts, well, the fire chiefs have an association, but the fire districts association also exists. They meet quarterly. And I find that that's incredibly beneficial and also was a key component gateway towards consolidations, sharing information, sharing. It's always a dinner, so they engage that way and it's hugely beneficial.
Thank you all for being here today. I really appreciate it. I'm the GM over at Sweetwater Springs Water District. And it's really good for, you guys to get together, talk. I wanted to throw out there too, though, if you have your administrators or if that work for you, we want to get together and maybe work with me and other administrators and districts in this area might be a good, plan to have happen where we could actually talk about some of the things that we can do together. Not just the, financial, share of staffing, and all those things we talked about today might be something that could, generate at the admin level to start with. And so,
Yeah.
that idea of shared resources, and equipment, and there's a lot that we could discuss, and there's a lot of potential out there, I think, for that future discussion. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you all.
That's a brilliant idea, and I hope that we can follow up on that, because I think that would be great to get everybody together. And that also reminds me of one other thing that might be a topic for a future meeting, but I know that funding is always a huge challenge. And, I've had lots of conversations with Sonoma Water, because we're very lucky that we have a whole team of federal lobbyists and state lobbyists and grant writers, right? And so we tend to be very aggressive at going after funding. Not all of our special districts have that, and so thinking about, are there ways that we could pool resources? Are there strategic investments that we could make, and potentially a common grant writer for some of our districts? Because, I'm very cognizant of, I don't want us to be sort of like the one sucking all the oxygen out of the room and taking up all of those funding opportunities when we know that there are needs, beyond just the county government arms. So with that, all right, that is the last thing on our agenda. I do want to mention, also, this is something that I think that Che figured out possibly, that, in terms of, potential ways of cost savings, that we actually do at the end of sort of the county life of our county-owned fleet vehicles, sell them at very low prices. And so we actually had one of the special districts, I can't remember which one, reach out kind of inquiring about that. And Jay was able to do some research and find out that that's actually an opportunity. So I don't know if you want to share anything else about that.
Yeah, so we usually sell them at auction, but we can sell them direct to our special districts through public infrastructure at cost, so they will be very affordable vehicles. Reach out to me directly, I can hook you up with the individual at public infrastructure that does that. And if you have a need for your special districts, just be clear on what kind of vehicle that you van, truck, that kind of thing, reach out to me. Thank you.
And with that, thank you again so much, Debbie, for organizing this. Again, this is just going to be sort of a high level overview of what's relevant to all of you. And I'm hearing interest, and maybe we could do this a couple times a year and continue to solicit feedback on upcoming agenda items. And then if there's any role that we can play, even if that's just in helping coordinate schedules or providing a meeting location, support administrators getting together, I think that's a really wonderful idea as well. So round of applause for all of you. Thank you all so much for taking this. And Vicky, can you hit that gavel one more time? Oh, yes. There we go.